please take a moment right now to hit like, subscribe, and share.
Especially share. That's the big one. I love acting. I've performed on almost every stage in town and have been in more than 40 shows. Acting has been a huge part of my life for a long time, and I hope it always will be. But even after all this time, I can still look back and say I remember exactly what my introduction to the world of the dramatic arts was. It all started with the very first school play I was in, The Wizard of Oz. My dad says I desperately wanted to be Toto, but we mixed up the days for auditions, and I ended up feeling unprepared, so I refused to audition at all. I'll be honest, I don't remember much about that. What I do remember is being given a role larger than a 6-year-old kid in grade 1 probably should have had, with an amalgamated version of the guard at the Emerald City, as well as one of the trees. I remember showing up to my very first rehearsal and having all my lines memorized, while all the grade 8s didn't, even though they had been rehearsing for months already. I remember my tree costume being too big and falling all over the place, the glue holding on my fake mustache smelling horrible, the fuzzy green mittens and hat making me sweat and itch like crazy, and singing my solo song to the best of my abilities every time. But most of all, I remember loving how it felt to perform on a stage with others for an audience. Those emotions must have stuck with me, because I was inspired to keep acting and performing every chance I got over the past 11 years. And everything finally came full circle last Wednesday at my high school graduation. After sitting there in the auditorium with hundreds of people under the sweltering lights and grad gowns, I crossed the stage while listening to the speaker talk about how I was entering a heavy science program at university, yet still managed to get the top marks in several drama courses over the past 4 years. I also received the Peterborough Theatre Guild Award for the Integrated Arts. Later that night, I read the letter enclosed with the award, and it was much more personal and touching than I was expecting. Because I was given the award by the same woman who taught at my elementary school and directed me in my very first play. It was quite an emotional moment for me, since 2 very monumental and life-changing experiences instantly became connected together. I'll be honest, I was excited to watch The Wizard of Oz again. It's a wonderful movie, an all-time classic, and it had been a while since I last saw it. The thing is, I wasn't able to solely appreciate the film on its own. It brought back all these emotions from when I was 6, and even last week at my graduation. The nostalgia and happiness just made the film viewing even more enjoyable. I owe a lot of my dramatic accomplishments to The Wizard of Oz, and I know that the story will always have a special place in my heart. And some people are just lucky enough to have these kinds of experiences and connections when they love old movies.
Hello, film historians. I'm Derek and I love old movies. We've got Sam the sidekick here.
Hello, and welcome to episode 47, our first episode of another month of listener requests.
Oh, and we've got a doozy to start off with.
Yeah, that's true. We're not starting off with anything remotely obscure here.
You want to tell him?
No, you.
Okay, well, today we're going to take a look at the 1939 classic, The Wizard of Oz, starring Judy Garland and directed by Victor Fleming.
This is the sort of movie that is on almost everyone's best of or favorites list.
It's true. For the young or the young at heart, this film represents a complete high-water benchmark for achievement in the category of beloved, timeless classics.
It's going to be a blast.
So let's do some business and get on with things.
Well, number one, we're really glad you're here.
Yep.
Thanks for listening.
You keep listening, we'll keep making episodes. That's the deal.
That's a good deal.
Business number 2. A bit of congratulations are due to you, I believe.
Oh, geez.
Sam graduated from high school last week, won a few honors here and there, is now officially ready for university in the fall. Way to go, kid. Everyone's really proud of you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I can't minor in podcasting.
What?
But I will be around so we can keep the show going.
I'll take it.
Moving on then.
Right. So if you're on an audio-only platform right now, why don't you see about dropping us some stars, maybe even a quick review?
You'd be surprised how much that sort of thing really helps.
And then, what the heck? Why not check us out on the socials?
Why not indeed? After all, we are on the Facebook.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
The Instagram.
At I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
El Twitter.
At ILOM podcast.
And the good old-fashioned email.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast at gmail.com.
All one word.
And of course, you should also do what the cool kids do, and that is pet the rock. And by that, we mean head on over to Pet Rock Radio and listen to amazing local, web-based radio programming with fantastic music and previous episodes of our show broadcast 1, 2, 3 times a week.
Monday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Pretty damn cool.
We'll link that for you in the description.
So, are you all set to go over the rainbow and not be in Kansas anymore?
Me and my little dog, too. Hit the music.
Our director is Victor Fleming. Fleming first entered the film industry in 1910 working as a stunt driver. Eventually, he worked his way up to the role of a cameraman for Douglas Fairbanks in 1915 and worked on films such as The Habit of Happiness. Fleming served with the Signal Corps in World War I and was even one of the cameramen at the Versailles Peace Conference. Afterwards, he was able to rejoin Fairbanks at United Artists Studios and later made his directorial debut with When the Clouds Roll By in 1919. Fleming later moved on to Paramount in the 1920s and directed his first major success, Lord Jim. He released a few more films over the next couple of years before making the transition to talkies with his first all-sound film, The Virginian. Moving to yet another studio, Fleming found himself at MGM throughout the 1930s, directing hits including Red Dust, Treasure Island, and Captain's Courageous. And then he was called in to take over the production of The Wizard of Oz in 1938. But before finishing, he was asked to take over the production of Gone with the Wind. Fleming's career started a slow downward spiral in the 40s, with only one film he released in the decade being at all successful. Despite his less than 4-decade-long career, Fleming managed to earn a total of 51 directing credits. Working right up until his death, Fleming's final film was Joan of Arc in 1948. He passed away in 1949, at the age of 59.
The writer is Noel Langley. Born in Durban, South Africa, Langley wrote his first play script in 1932 called Queer Cargo. 2 years later, he moved to the UK and started writing plays for the West End theatres and began publishing novels, the first of which was a historical satire titled Cage Me a Peacock in 1935. In the late 1930s, Langley slowly integrated himself into the British film industry, and his first screenplay was Secret of Stamboul in 1936, before signing a 7-year contract with MGM Studios and moving to Hollywood. His first American film was Maytime in 1937, which was closely followed by The Wizard of Oz in 1939. With the start of World War II, Langley found his career being put on pause as he served in the Royal Canadian Navy for several years. After the war, his career remained fairly slow-moving, choosing to focus on British films and only worked on 3 films in the 50s. After the 50s and throughout the remainder of his career, Langley wrote scripts for a few TV series, such as The Best of the Post, and continued to publish novels, plays, and short stories. His last film was Snow White and the Three Stooges in 1961, and he retired with a total of 49 writing credits. Langley passed away in 1980 at the age of 68.
The Wizard of Oz is a film with many interesting characters and actors, and honestly, choosing some to profile was a bit difficult.
But one thing that this movie definitely has is possibly the most iconic trio of sidekicks in cinematic history, so we're going to be talking about them.
Known as the skinny farmhand Hunk in Kansas, but as the Scarecrow in the Land of Oz, Ray Bolger's career in entertainment spanned decades, as well as crossing media, from film to television to stage. A former vaudeville tap dancer, Bolger was signed to an MGM contract in 1936 and made a few interesting films quickly, including Sweethearts, the first MGM film in color. He was assigned to the production of The Wizard of Oz, and his contract stated that he would have to play whatever role he was given. Initially, he was cast as the Tin Man, and Buddy Ebsen was given the role of the Scarecrow. But these roles were soon swapped, and the Scarecrow makeup was harsh, leaving Bolger with permanent facial marks. After Oz, Bolger moved to RKO, but was certainly never again in a film of The Wizard of Oz's stature. He did shows on Broadway, off and on, from the 30s to the 60s, and he also worked in television, starring in The Ray Bolger Show in the 1950s, before eventually moving into the purgatory of guest star appearances in the 70s and 80s, turning up on TV shows like Fantasy Island, Little House on the Prairie, Battlestar Galactica, and Different Strokes. His last appearance was in the documentary That's Dancing, which he hosted. This was 2 years before his death in 1987, at the age of 83.
Playing Hickory, the golden-voiced farmhand, as well as the ever-rusty but ever-trusty Tin Man, was song and dance man and vaudeville veteran Jack Haley. Haley was a musical talent, recording in the 1920s before beginning to make a series of short and feature-length films. He mostly appeared in musicals, and none of any special renown, and moved between Fox, Paramount, and MGM. Towards the end of the 1930s, he had a radio show that lasted for 2 years, and on it he worked with performers like Lucille Ball. As with Ray Bolger, though, the jewel in the crown of his career was playing the Tin Man. Buddy Ebsen had been assigned the role by MGM, but a severe reaction to the silver makeup, which was powderized and settled in his lungs, led to serious health problems that removed him from the film. Haley was given the role, the makeup converted to a thick paste, and Hollywood history was made. Now, did the makeup severely affect his eyes so badly that emergency surgery was needed to save his vision? Yes, but still, his performance, and the film itself, became forever memorable. Definitely, this was a suffer-for-your-art situation. Haley didn't become more famous or successful after the film, but kept working in musicals when he left the film industry for a career in real estate. He didn't make another film until the 1970s, and his last film appearance was in Martin Scorsese's New York, New York. His role was uncredited. Jack Haley died in 1979 at the age of 81.
Bert Lahr played farmhand Zeke, who saves Dorothy from the pigs, but also the Cowardly Lion of Oz. Like his castmates, Lahr had a background in vaudeville, but he also worked in burlesque. His career featured work in films and television and on the Broadway stage. In fact, despite his limited work in film and television, it was in theater that he made his biggest mark, appearing in the debut American run of Waiting for Godot, and then later winning a Tony Award for Best Actor for Foxy. He was also recognized as Shakespearean Actor of the Year for his role as Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream. But despite all that, Lahr will always be best remembered for his role as the Lion, if not for coining the phrase Heavens to Murgatroyd, later popularized by Snagglepuss. Lahr's lion costume was actually made from real lion fur, and incredibly, despite its weight and the temperatures it subjected Lahr to, he retained not only his sense of humor, but his good spirit, frequently ad-libbing lines and cracking up everyone on set. Lahr's film career was not, as we say, littered with hits, and in fact, Wizard of Oz was sort of the beginning of a slow end to his film career. After a very busy 1930s, Lahr made only 4 films in the 40s, 3 in the 50s, and 1 in the 60s, called The Night They Raided Minsky's. That was his final role. Bert Lahr died in 1967, at the age of 72.
So sometimes when we review a truly classic film, especially one with a complicated production, there can be a lot to talk about, and it's hard to narrow it down to something that will fit onto the show.
The Wizard of Oz was no exception. We could have talked at length of the many sinister abuses Judy Garland endured while making this film, or the exploitation of the actors who played the Munchkins. We could have talked about the harrowing makeup experiences the actors were subjected to, mishaps with fire that injured performers or stunt people, or how some of the actors like Margaret Hamilton never outgrew the image of them presented in this film. No matter how you cut it, this film has a pretty dark cloud hanging over its production.
But we wanted to go a different way and look at some of the amazing urban legends that surround this film. 2 in particular.
And these are pretty amazing, but are they true? Let's see. The first one we want to discuss is the legendary synchronicity between The Wizard of Oz and the classic Pink Floyd album, Dark Side of the Moon.
Word is, if you play the album while watching the film, they will line up so perfectly, you would be convinced that the band recorded this album specifically to go with the movie.
But of course, that's ridiculous, right? Well, let's see. According to the good folks over at goldminemag.com, here's what you need to do to get the full experience. From their website. Step 1. Insert Dark Side of the Moon into your CD player, press play. Once the album starts to play, press pause. Then press the track rewind to take you back to the beginning of the very first track. Number 2, set the CD player for album repeat. Start the Wizard of Oz DVD. We recommend going into the menu and choosing subtitles to play with the movie because it lets the music take the spotlight, but you can continue to follow the movie without getting distracted by spoken dialogue. Our DVD copy of the movie was free of pesky previews, so we could just select Play Movie. Number 4, wait for the black and white MGM line to appear. Once he roars for the 3rd time, hit play on the CD player. Press mute or turn down the volume on your TV, or crank up the volume in your headphones if others wish to watch the movie as it was originally made. Number 5, to confirm the album and the movie are in sync, according to ehow.com, when you see the credit produced by Marvin Leroy, the credit should be fading amid the transition from Speak to Me to Breathe.
Okay, but then what?
Well, the songs, both in titles and in lyrics, seem to align with some of the action that we see in the film itself. And I mean, too close. Like, can't possibly be a coincidence close. With a song like Great Gig in the Sky, referring to both the tornado scene and also the wizard's return home in his balloon, for example.
Wait, how long is that one song?
You have to play the album 3 times through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And are we convinced it's a thing? Is this really?
Well, the band denied it, joking that in fact the album was intended to be about the sound of music. But I don't know. And then again, I have a feeling a lot of drugs were involved.
In recording the album, or in somehow discovering that it syncs with the film?
Yes.
So, is this urban legend true?
Well, the synchronicity between the album and the movie are true, for sure. Was there a deliberate intention behind it? I'm not sure that's likely.
Okay, on to the next one.
So this is a little grimmer. It's the tale of an actor, one of the Munchkins, who supposedly hung himself on set, and his dangling body was not only captured on film, but also made the final cut, and wasn't discovered until the late 1980s, when a special remastered edition of the film came out on home video.
What? No way. This can't possibly be true. Wait, is it true?
Well, from ScreenRant.com. Although an aura of darkness shrouds the legacy of the Wizard of Oz, this particular claim is overwhelmingly false. The so-called dead Munchkin myth stemmed from a specific scene that takes place around 45 minutes into the movie, wherein protagonist Dorothy, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Woodsman walk off in the distance while singing "We're Off to See the Wizard." As the trio is seen walking away, the left side of the screen appears to feature a human form hanging from a tree. However, on closer inspection, this assumption can be easily debunked, as it is simply the silhouette of a bird within the set of the movie. This revelation is backed by the fact that several birds of varying sizes were borrowed from the Los Angeles Zoo to allow to roam the indoor set in order to grant it a more outdoorsy feel. The unusual movement of the bird, in the background of the scene, became a subject for speculation for those viewing the film on home video, and they were able to rewind and play the scene in slow motion, birthing wild theories of an actor driven to despair over his unrequited love for a female Munchkin.
So no one died during the production of this film?
Well, there were many abuses, lots of bad luck and carelessness, and some terrible chemical reactions. But no on-camera suicides, mercifully.
Such a bright and happy film. Such a dark production.
Right? Anyway, what's the tail of the tape on this one, Sam?
Okay, so we have an 8.1 on IMDb.
There we go.
The audience score is 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the tomato meter is 98%. The film won Oscars for Best Original Song and Best Original Score, and it was nominated for 3 more Academy Awards. The film can be rented on Amazon Prime Video, or just found at your local secondhand DVD shop.
Dorothy Gale lives on a Kansas farm with her Uncle Henry and Auntie Em. Dorothy's dog Toto bites the influential Mrs. Gulch, and Gulch gets a letter from the sheriff allowing her to take Toto to be destroyed. Dorothy runs away to protect the dog and meets wandering charlatan Professor Marvel.
Marvel realizes Dorothy is a runaway and gives her advice that sends her running home. But as she approaches, a tornado has begun its approach. The Gales and the farmhands have taken refuge in a storm cellar, but Dorothy finds shelter in the house.
The tornado lifts the entire house into the sky, landing it on top of a witch in a place known as Munchkinland. Glinda, the good witch, and the Munchkins all celebrate the Wicked Witch's demise, but then her sister shows up, vowing revenge on Dorothy and her dog. Of special interest are the ruby slippers that the dead witch owned, the other witch wants, and are now on Dorothy's feet.
Dorothy wants to return home and is advised to seek out the Wizard of Oz, whom she can find by following the yellow brick road that leads to the Emerald City.
As Dorothy makes her way, she meets and befriends three sad souls: a scarecrow with no brain, a tin man with no heart, and a lion with no courage. Together, the four of them head to the Emerald City to have their desires met, while avoiding the schemes of the witch, who still wants those ruby slippers.
The wizard no-sells their request, telling them if they want his help, they must return to him with the witch's broomstick. So the four set out to deal with her once and for all, but they are attacked by an army of flying monkeys, and Dorothy and Toto are captured. When the three sidekicks arrive to rescue her, it goes about as poorly as you might imagine.
The witch sets the scarecrow on fire, and Dorothy throws a bucket of water on him. The water hits the witch, killing her instantly, and she melts away and disintegrates. And her army of evil minions all change sides and hail Dorothy. When the heroes return to the Emerald City with the broomstick, the wizard is shown to be a simple, ordinary man from Kansas who arrives in Oz by way of an errant hot air balloon. He gives the scarecrow a diploma, the tin man a heart-shaped clock, and the lion a medal for bravery, and he offers to fly Dorothy back home.
Some bad luck has the balloon take off without Dorothy in it, so she is stuck, which her friends are happy about because they all want her to stay. But the good witch shows up and reveals that the ruby slippers could have taken her home at any time.
What? At any time? That would have been handy information back in Munchkinland.
She taps her heels and says there's no place like home.
And when she wakes up, she is in her bed in Kansas. The tornado has passed by. Professor Marvel and the three farmhands and Auntie Em and Uncle Henry are all there checking in on her. She realized the three farmhands were her three friends in Oz, and Professor Marvel was the wizard, Mrs. Gulch, the witch.
She believes what she experienced was real, as everyone chuckles and shakes their heads at her. Poor concussed girl. But Dorothy learned the most valuable lesson of all during her time in Oz. There's no place like home.
The end.
Love it.
Perfect movie.
Just chef's kiss on that one.
Hits the spot. Every time.
Pros and cons?
Let's do it. As always, we don't actually rate films here on the show. There are no stars, there are no thumbs. We just tell you some things we liked.
Some things we didn't.
And then we recommend whether or not you might enjoy giving this one a watch.
Take it away.
My pros. Number one, the production values. The costumes, the sets, the background paintings, the score, the special effects, the props. Let's get real for a moment. What in this film doesn't work? This movie is a feast for the eyes, colorful and imaginative, magical and fantastic. And what's so cool is this film came out some 50 years before CGI became more common. All the effects, the flame, the teleporting, they're practical, actually happening. The costumes and the makeup, actual, real, not enhanced by technology. The sets, vast and immersive, all created by hand. The flying monkeys that take off and land, pure nightmare fuel. It's an incredible assembly of production. Number two, the songs. So everyone knows I'm not much of a musical guy, at least certainly not a stage musical guy. And with film musicals, I'm picky. Some I love, some not so much. The Wizard of Oz certainly fits into the love category. A wide range of songs, none so long to overstay their welcome, and sung in a series of weird voices by strange characters. Somewhere Over the Rainbow is, simply, one of the greatest movie songs of all time, and in a film so stacked with visual thrills, great acting, and the aforementioned production values, to have highly entertaining and clever songs to present as well is just icing on the cake. This film is so good, I don't even think of it as a musical, which might be the highest praise I can give. Number three, the performances. How? In a film where literally everyone is playing way over the top, does it never seem like anyone is overacting? This whole film is filled with very broad performances, every character drawn very large, but it all fits. It works. You never find yourself saying, "Oh man, that lion, he was just too much," or "Oh, that witch, what a cartoon." No. In the Land of Oz, everyone and everything is spectacularly over the top, and the film, rather than being detracted from, is actually made all the better for it. My cons? Okay. Judy Garland is Dorothy. I know. I'm treading on sacred ground here. Garland's performance, let me just say, it's perfect. Full stop. She is iconic in the role. But the fact of the matter is, the Dorothy character as written in the novel is very young. Younger than 10. She's a child. At 17, Judy Garland looks every bit a late adolescent, a young woman, and she frequently seems too old for the role. This takes nothing away from her performance, which is perfect in both acting and singing, and her take on the character certainly stands the test of time, but it is not the character as written, and in many ways, it isn't even close. When she presents the naive childlike wonder, the disconnect between who the actress is and the role she is playing seems to become more obvious. Now, I low-key have the same problem with Billie Burke as Glinda. While she turns in a fine performance and, sure, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, she just looks a little rough on the eyes for all the characters that fawn over her for being beautiful. Things like that distract needlessly. But that's it. I'm absolutely not going to nitpick the fine details of one of the greatest films of all time. It's endlessly entertaining, always quotable, eternally memorable. The Wizard of Oz is the textbook definition of the term timeless classic. Generations of parents and children have enjoyed this film together and will continue to do so. I watched it with my parents and with my own daughter, and have unfailing confidence that she will watch it with her children one day. The world of wonder created by this film, inhabited by a succession of amazing characters, locations, and situations, make this an adventure that all can and should enjoy. Every so often we go beyond the scope of simply giving a film a watch recommendation, and we just call it required viewing. That's exactly what this film is. Required. Essential. Mandatory. You're up.
Okay, so my pros. 1. The foreshadowing. This was really cool. They were really nothing more than a couple of small comments. One was when Hunk was telling Dorothy how she should use her brain, and she wasn't made of straw. Another was when Zeke was getting laughed at for how scared he was, or when Dorothy called Miss Gulch a witch. All these comments were setting up the fact that in Dorothy's fantasy, these people became things based on their conversations. Hunk was the Scarecrow, Zeke the Cowardly Lion, and Miss Gulch the Wicked Witch of the West. Most people probably wouldn't think much of it, but I really enjoyed it. I never picked up on these things as a kid, but after rewatching the film now, I was able to notice all these little moments. 2. The sets. They were incredible. While the farm back in Kansas was great, the sets really started getting noticeable in Munchkinland. Everything is so bright and vibrant. The surroundings are always so lush and full, with fields, trees, or even poppies. You could really tell that they spared no expense in bringing the Land of Oz to life and making it as realistic and beautiful as possible. 3. The Wicked Witch's first entrance and exit. They were so cool. She just appeared and disappeared in a cloud of red smoke. They looked flawless. I mean, it completely looks like the Wicked Witch is appearing out of thin air. It's an amazing effect, and it's even more incredible when you know it was happening in real time and not in post-production editing tricks. The best part is that it doesn't look cheap or shoddy looking back on it today. They did it in 1939, and it still holds up. It's really impressive what they were able to accomplish with special effects throughout the film. Now my cons. 1. I feel like a couple scenes could have been reshot. There were no major mess-ups, but a few things were just maybe a bit sloppy. Like, there are a few parts where some members of the army in Munchkinland are just not in sync, so it looks a little off. Or how during the Wicked Witch of the West exit from Munchkinland, it almost seemed like she missed her cue. Again, it was nothing major, and it didn't take away from the film as a whole. But little slips like that aren't something you would typically see in a film like this one, so it wouldn't have been bad to redo a couple shots. 2. The sound quality. This wasn't really a big deal at all. It didn't even happen the entire time, but there were a few moments where the sound got a bit fuzzy around dialogue and singing. You could still hear what was being said, it just wasn't as clear. And really, this didn't distract from the film at all, it was just something that I happened to notice. Now, normally I would have another con, but for this film, I just could not find one. And honestly, my second con is a bit of a stretch as it is. But overall, 110% watch this movie. It's an amazing film that has certainly stood the test of time. I loved it as a kid, and it was still a blast to watch now. The scenery is beautiful, the acting is wonderful, and the special effects are amazing. And I mean, come on, it's The Wizard of Oz. It's a classic. Of course you have to watch it.
Okay. And just like that, as always, we come to the end of another episode, and perhaps predictably, it's a big double watch for The Wizard of Oz.
It's sad this one has to be over. I feel like I could talk about this film for a long, long time.
Me too. We find that sometimes when an episode is over, there's so many more things we could have said, or a few days later, we actually think of more things to say.
We should do a month of episodes like that. Revisit films we've watched before that we have new thoughts on.
Like redos?
No, not redos. More like expansions. Going deeper. I don't know.
That might be cool. Well, what about it? Is this a cool idea? Would you like to hear us go deeper on films we've had second thoughts on? Let us know all about it in the comments, or send us an email.
And be sure to join us next week for another listener request. And guess what?
What?
We'll be getting our Bert Lancaster on.
Oh, no.
But until then, be sure to watch more movies.
And let everyone know about us. We're not a secret, and you do not have to keep us all to yourselves.
So tell your friends.
Tell your enemies.
You never know. They might like dropping a house on witches as much as you do.
Maybe even more. For Sam the Sidekick, I'm Derek, and I love old movies. Additional research for I Love Old Movies, the podcast, is done by Nikki Weatherden. Audio clips come from freefx.co.uk. Images are used through the provisions of fair use, and our theme song, Burning Bridges, is by The Crocs.